Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the MSR Workshop. So today's episode we are going to be talking about small shop dust collection. Some of the things that I've learned over the years, tips and tricks, and how you can better set up collection in your shop when you really have a limited space. So stick around and I think you guys will enjoy this. So in most small garage shops or home shops, most people get started off with something like a shop vac. So your shop vac would be connected to a tool, say your miter saw or your router table, and while it does move quite a bit of air at a high velocity, it doesn't move a large volume of air. So what I mean by that, so with a typical shop vac hose that's this size, or maybe like a 3-inch that you would see on, say, like a Rigid or your generic run-of-the-mill shop vac tubing, it's going to have air that's moving at a very high speed but a low volume. So the closer you are to the dust area that you're going to be extracting dust from, the better job it does. So like your router table, for instance, this can be very close on that little back port of your router table, and it does a pretty good job of getting all the chips and shavings away from it. But the farther you move this away from the area that you're collecting dust, the less effective it's going to be because it's not able to draw a large volume of air. So if I was to hook a shop vac up to my table saw or planer or a bandsaw or a bigger tool that requires a large volume of air, it's not going to be effective. And that's when you would want to step up to a larger dedicated dust collection system. Now, why most people and homeowners probably don't have a dedicated shop that they've got endless amounts of space that they can put a big dust collection system, I think I found a few ways that you can actually put a larger dust collection system in a very small space. So stick around and I'm going to show you what we got. So one of the most effective and inexpensive ways to start off hooking up your dust collection system is doing something with PVC pipe. PVC pipe is quite inexpensive for long runs. You're not going to spend a whole bunch of money and break the bank. And then you can get fittings meant to run flex tubing. Now you'll see in other videos that people will have a dedicated dust collection system and they've got it on wheels and they'll just wheel it around their shop and plug it into each tool. Now, while that works great, and the closer you can get your dust collection system to that tool, the more volume of air it's going to move. It's not ideal because you still have that dust collector taking up space on your shop floor. Well, that space could be used for other tools and just space is precious when you're in a small area. So start off by, if you want to plumb your dust collection system in, by using PVC pipe. You can join the PVC pipe together with silicone, and silicone makes it nice because you do have an airtight seal, but it's also removable. So if you do need to take it down or reconfigure it at some time, you can take it apart. And then you're going to put a blast gate. A blast gate is a little door that opens and closes and restricts airflow to a specific area. Now, if you were just to have this plumbed into every tool, your volume of air would drop dramatically because it can't pull that large of an area all at once. So you're going to want to be able to shut and open air to a specific tool so you're getting the maximum amount of suction to that specific tool. So when you're getting ready to set up a system that's like this, there's some things that you want to remember. One, the straighter the run to a specific tool that you can get, the better. So you want as least amount of bends as possible because every time you make a turn, that air has to go around that corner and it actually slows the velocity and the volume down a little bit. So if you can make gentle sweeps when you have to make a turn, the better. So this type of fitting here, instead of just being a T going both directions, It's a sweeping turn, and actually this area down here is all open. So actually there is a large amount of space inside here, so the air doesn't have to make a hard turn, and it doesn't slow my air down as much. Then when you're choosing a blast gate, now originally I started off with blast gates like this. This is a 2.5 inch, and then I've got 4-inch ones as well. These are not really serviceable. What I mean by that is dust gets settled in the bottom of these gates, and so then they end up only closing about halfway, and then you have air gaps. So when you want to go to your tool and close it, they don't close every way. So these are a bit of a pain. Now there is metal ones, and I hope you can see it hiding behind this post here, that the bottom, they can be taken apart, and the bottom is open just a little bit. So when you close it, this piece goes down through the bottom, and any dust that settles in here gets pushed through. So you always have a good seal with these. They're a little bit more expensive, but they work so much better. So I would stay away from these and go for the metal ones. They're a little bit more money. Spend the more money. You will thank me in the end, because then you won't be buying twice. So before we climb up in the attic and show you what collector I'm using and how I've got it set up, there's a few things that I want to clear up before you start setting up your dust collection system. And one little misconception is that you have to ground your dust collection system. If you haven't heard of that before and you look it up, there is both sides to the story. And the idea behind grounding it is most types of tubing, because you're moving chips in a large volume of air, it creates a little bit of a static charge. That static charge can make a small spark or whatever, and people think that you can have a shop fire because of that. So there's been some research studies, and I'll try to find the article and link it below. In a home shop environment, it's almost impossible to create a large enough volume of air and sawdust moving through to create a home shop fire explosion, whatever you want to call it, in a home environment. Now, industrial shops, it's more of a risk, because they're moving thousands of cubic feet of air with so much sawdust going through that it is possible. Now, even though the most well thought out grounded dust collection system, it's not 100% a guarantee that you're going to be able to ground your system. When you're using PVC pipe, because it's a plastic pipe, you do get a little bit more of a static charge. You'll notice things stick to it a little bit more. And sometimes when you touch a metal tool after using it a little bit, you get a little bit of like a static shock. With PVC, it's almost impossible. Even if you run wires through it or wrap it in foil tape, it's almost impossible to ground a PVC pipe setup like this. So don't worry about it, put it out of mind. And in this research article, they try to recreate a home shop explosion from sawdust and a spark, and they were not able to successfully create one, just because the volume of air that a home shop uses is going to be so low. Now, fires do happen when you're using metal on, say, your belt sander, and you're grinding a screw or something, taking off the burr of something. Well, those little hot sparks get into your system and go and sit in your dust collector and smolder until they do catch a shop fire. That is a risk, and that's something to be careful for. But from a static charge, they do not have any recorded instances of a home shop fire from a static charge explosion. Now that we've got that confusing stuff out of the way, don't worry about grounding your thing. Now, if it's slightly annoying, you can, try to, because you just hate getting, shocked when you touch the doorknob after a highly static day. You can try, but it's going to be hard. Now, if you have an all-metal dust collection system, it's a little bit easier to do, but it's still not 100%. You're still going to occasionally get that static buildup on there. Now, moving on from that, the next thing is talking about it is a two-stage system. What a two-stage system is you have your main collector, and then you have a pre-collector. Well, what that pre-collector does is takes all the heavy chips. Usually it's some form of cyclone system where it's spinning. All the heavy chips settle into a bucket, trash can, some kind of container first before it goes into the final dust collector. And so the final dust collector is just catching that really fine dust. And so you're not filling up your main collector quickly. So there's a number of plans I've seen on Etsy or some of these other DIY websites where they have people making a dust collector for their shop vac. You know, the rigid one where you get the little rigid bucket and put the top on it and it spins it out, and then all the fine dust just goes in your main collector. Well, that does work. What happens is, because a shop vac is not designed for a two-stage system, you are losing a lot of suction. And I built one of those thinking, okay, well, I'm going to save my filter on my shop vac, because you know how those filters get just clogged up constantly, and then you lose a lot of suction there. But what I found is, after I hooked up that two-stage system, I lost a lot of suction power. I'm like, wow, this really dropped down. And it was dramatic enough that I wasn't happy with the performance of my shop vac on certain tools because of how much suction I lost. So I actually quit using that collector. Now, I do have to clean my filter off more, but I think the trade-off with increased performance of my shop vac without the two-stage collector was far outweighed the hassle of having to clean it out more often. So on bigger shop vacs, or dust collection systems for say, if they're not necessarily designed to run a two-stage system, you may find that you get a drop in overall performance of that collector. So the collector that I'm using is a Jet, and I'll throw the model number below because I don't remember offhand, but when we go up there we'll take a look at it. But it runs off of a 110, it's not a huge 221, and I have it set up with a two-stage system. And rated manufacturer CFM, which stands for cubic feet per minute, it's how much volume of air it's pulling, it's rated at about 1100. Now that 1100 rating is right at the inlet opening for the collector, but the farther I get away, the more runs I have, the more air leaks, the more turns and bends in my collection, that is going to drop off. And you may find that if you set up that two-stage system, you may get a significant amount of drop-off initially. Now, I don't have an anemometer which measures air velocity to see how much drop I'm getting with my two-stage collector, but because I have a large planer that makes a ton of shavings very quickly, that two-stage system has saved me quite a bit of time of climbing up in my attic and having to take that bag off, which is a little bit of a hassle because there's this big retainer ring and it's not fun to change. But with the trash can that I have set up there, all I do is lift the trash can out and take it out to my garbage can and dump it. You'll have to balance the trade-off with air volume drop with convenience. So let's climb up there and show you what I've got set up. Hey guys, we're up in my attic, and so this is my Jet dust collector that I have. Now Grizzly makes a similar one, but this is the Jet 1100, I believe, and I'll throw a link in the description below, and I'll also throw a couple different options if this is either out of your price range or you just can't fit it, you know, in the area that you want. Now, the 1100 stands for 1100 CFM, and it is a 1.5 horsepower, 110 volt dust collector. Because it's in my attic, I don't have 220 hookup, but 110, yeah, you just run an extension cord and there's a number of options you can plug it in. Now, my attic is not very tall. So to the peak right here to down at the bottom, I'm right at about 5 feet. So very, very short distance from obviously the floor to the ceiling. So normally this collector is quite a bit taller. So one way I was able to overcome the height is it has metal supports on either side. What I did is just chopped the metal supports, dropped the whole height of the machine down, and then just bolted the legs back together to itself. That way it lowered the overall height of the machine while I can still get the advantage of having more dust collection. Now Jet does make a model called the 650. That is about 650 CFM. So initially when I first did my setup, I got the 650 and it worked okay. But because it's such a long ways away from my tools, you know, I ran it down through the wall and out in the shop like you saw, I was getting quite a bit of drop off with that. So I was thinking, okay, well if I get 2 of them, because they're a shorter machine, I can stick 2 of them on the same run and it's going to double my CFM. It doesn't work that way. 650 CFM is still 650 CFM whether I have 2 motors or 1. And the other problem is I got one before I got the other one. So that one had time to collect dust in the canister and drop its overall suction. So what happens is the brand new one actually was pulling air from this one a little bit. And so they were not working together and they were fighting against each other just a little bit. So I ended up selling those two and moving to this one, and when I figured out how I could get it up here, because it's a tight fit. Now there's different types of dust collectors. You'll notice ones that have the cyclone system built on. Those definitely wouldn't fit up here. The other types are the ones with the bags on top. Now the ones with the bag collapses when you turn the dust collector off, and then when you turn it on, the bag goes poof, and they just get dust everywhere. So up in your attic, you don't want dust all over in your attic. And the other problem with those is those bags get clogged up very easily and they have a smaller surface area. So the next option is one with a canister. A canister has multiple pleats, just like your air conditioner filter, that you have a larger surface area that it's pulling in air here and helping your suction out. Well, the beauty of the canister pleats is, one, because you have a larger surface area that it's pulling for, but also you can clean them off very easily. And there is a set of flappers inside and a handle. And I would just rotate this guy here. It knocks any fine settlings that get in the pleats here down into the bag, and then I restore my overall suction. This canister also does come off the top. You can take it outside and blow it out if you need to. Spinning that a couple times after you've done a bunch of sanding really does help boost your suction back up. The other thing that I have done, as you can see over here, is a 2-stage separator. Now, I have not been able to test whether it drops my suction overall down, but because I do fill it up rather quickly, being able to just lift the lid off of that trash can there, take it outside and dump it and put it back is a heck of a lot easier than trying to maneuver this bag off and take it out. The jet, when it comes with a Y connector, and then the port size on here is a 6-inch port. Initially, I had it set up to the Y. The Y, I just wired it into there and then ran it to my run. But I found that getting a 6-inch set of tubing, running it to my separator here, and then running 4-inch the rest of the way, helped my dust collection overall. Now, obviously, the larger volume of collection tubing is going to move a larger volume of air, but for practicality purposes, running 6-inch tubing in a small home shop is just really overkill, and I personally did not have the space, and I know most people won't. This is set up with a remote. So downstairs, I just push a button and a remote turns on. Well, actually, initially I had the button. So you just push the button, the remote turns on. And it's just one of these little boxes that you plug in, and then you have a remote anywhere in your shop. Well, one way I found it quite a bit easier is I have an Alexa device, and I plugged it into one of my Alexa little outlets. It doesn't pull enough amperage to mess with that, and so then I just say, Alexa, turn my such and such on. I'm not going to say the word because it'll turn it on, and then it turns it on. So it's voice activated. I just yell at it and turn it on and turn it off. It works really good. Overall, I'm very happy with it. I wish that I had more space to run an even larger 2-stage cyclone system that was designed to run a 2-stage cyclone system. But as you can see, you can run a large collector like this in a small space and in a small garage. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to leave them in the comments below. I try to answer everybody's comments, and I'll make sure to leave some different links below for some different dust collectors that I think would be good in a small shop. Thanks, guys.